To begin this day, we will start with a panel of experts to be or not to be on being a researcher. I would like everybody to help me welcome our experts today. In the first place, Jesús Fernando Guerrero Rodríguez. He is a researcher at the Institute for Historical Research in UJED since 2011. He is the coordinator of the MA in Science and Humanities PNPC, registered 002909 since June 2012. He holds a PhD in Medieval Studies from the University of York in the United Kingdom. He has studied as well Viking and Nordic Medieval Studies in the University of Oslo in Norway. He holds a BA in Spanish Literature from the ITESM, Campus Monterrey, Mexico. He is a member of the directive board of the International Saga Society since 2003. He is a member of the Viking Society for Northern Research since 2004. He has also studied and given conferences in Iceland, Denmark, Sweden, Estonia, Spain, and France. Please give him a welcome applause. Another of our experts is Homero Adame. He is a writer born in Mexico City and currently living in San Luis Potosí. He does freelance work for national magazines and newspapers, specializing in travel and folklore publications. He also works on special projects for the Secretaría de Cultura and the Secretaría de Turismo on programs such as Fomento a la Lectura and creating the texts for the respective websites. He is, above all, a researcher who works extensively in the field and uses his data to compile books on oral tradition. Please give him a welcome applause. Also with us is Martha Lengeling. She holds a doctorate in language studies from Kent University in the United Kingdom and a master's in TESOL from West Virginia University from the US. She's a teacher trainer in the BA in TESOL and the ISEL program at the University of Guanajuato. Martha is a member of the SNI, Sistema Nacional de Investigadores. Currently, she is the editor-in-chief of the MexTESOL journal and has published articles and books nationally and internationally. I would like to help me welcome Douglas Goodwin. He's been a professor and researcher at the Universidad of Guanajuato since 1992 and is currently a member of the National System of Researchers. His studies include a BA in Spanish and Education from the Western Oregon University, a Master's in Education in Educational Technology and ELT from the University of Manchester, a PhD in Language Studies from the University of Kent, and his research interests include culture in language education, intercultural communication, and identity in language education. He currently holds the position of Second Language Learning Coordinator for the University of Guanajuato. Also with us is Jonathan Garcia Campos. He is a researcher at the Instituto de Ciencias Sociales at UJED and is currently a member of the National System for Researchers, Level 1. He holds a PhD in Philosophy of Science from the Instituto de Investigaciones Filosóficas at UNAM. Dr. Garcia has written 2 books, edited an anthology, and published several articles in specialized journals. Among his research interests are epistemology and philosophy of psychology. Please welcome our experts. Now, for the first part of the panel, I would like to invite our experts to talk to us about their motivation to do research. We would like to know if you think being a researcher is a calling, How did you start doing research, and what are your motivations to keep doing research? Professor Douglas, if you will.
Good morning, and thank you for the invitation. I'll start very quickly. I don't think it is a calling. I think it's more training. My training was when I did my PhD. I learned how to do research, and I also learned how to write, probably in a more academic way. I find it extremely interesting, and I find it like a puzzle, that I have to solve a puzzle with research, and that's why I enjoy doing it, because it's an extremely complex way of thinking, and that's why I enjoy it. Now, how do I feel about it? Very, very unsure. When I go through the process, I feel, how am I going to do this? How am I going to solve the problem? When I do solve the problem, I feel good, because there are two ways that I always try to represent my research, which is presenting in an event like this, and also publishing. Another perk is that if you're in the SNI, the Sistema Nacional de Investigadores, it's more money. And so I look at it as, I've got another job, and I've got to do it so that I receive money. So it is a very complex process. Who's now?
Professor Douglas, I'd like to hear from you.
Well, in my case, is it a calling? I don't think so. There's that would be something more spiritual when you talk about calling. I think research is a state of mind in some ways. How did I begin doing research? Well, it's incidents or accidents of life, perhaps. I was doing some kind of research or trying to find archaeological evidences in the area where I grew up, and what people didn't know, didn't tell me things about that. They always told me stories, and I collected the stories, and eventually I had so many stories that somebody said, why don't you make a book? And I liked that, so I published a book, and then I kept doing that sort of research. So it was not a calling, it was life led me through it in that way. And what are the motivations for doing research? Well, the motivations is doing it. As I say, it's a state of mind. If you like doing that, you will always like it, and that's. And then when your work is published or goes to other people to read, that's also very motivating. And therefore, to the last question here, have you ever felt disappointed? Not really. Sometimes yes, because you have like a particular project that you want to do, and you're doing the research and you don't find the information that you want, and you have to drop that project. Because of that, it can be disappointing, but you move on and you do something else. So that's basically it.
Good morning. Thanks also for inviting me, and I apologize for my voice. It's a little bit rough from the climate changes here. First question, do I think research is a calling? I think I agree with the first two speakers. I don't think it's really a calling unless you consider just being naturally curious and wanting to discover new things about where you're working or what you're learning. If you consider that a calling, then yes, it is. But research is exploring and learning about phenomena and things that you have discovered where you live, work, and study. Not everybody is as equipped to do research as other people are, but I think it can be done. How did I start? If you subtract, basically starting around junior high and high school, they always made us do little research papers, and they would teach us how to use the library resources and read a book, write a report about it. If you take away that, my official research started around my master's degree when I had to do my first thesis. okay? And I know there's a lot of people here from undergraduate studies that look at that thesis as this big monster. It's not that big, okay? It's just a matter of how you look at it, okay? Motivations I have for research. One, I like to keep things fresh in my work, my teaching. Don't want to get into a rut. I want to find something new, discover something. If I see something happening, I want to learn about it. Two, as Martha mentioned, there is sort of a financial motivation. Let's be honest. There is the SNE. We have to have our PNPC ProDep. We have each institution has their internal stimulus programs, and the more research and more publications you do, the better you look before the people who authorize this funding. Okay, and I have one other motivation here. I just lost my spot. For me, one thing for my motivation is I'd like to have an impact in the field that I'm working in. Okay, I mean, research something, offer it to the community, and if it helps other researchers or other teachers or trainees to be better at what they're trying to do, then I feel like I've done my job. Okay, and I think if I can do that, all the above are covered at the same time. I think the disappointment part, okay. Anybody who's done research, if they haven't felt disappointed, they're not being honest. Okay, research is a very long road. It can be very depressing, but there's some really cool high moments that make the rest of it worth it. All right, thank you.
Well, good morning. I want to thank, before speaking, I want to thank Roxana Cano and Catherine Duran for inviting me to this panel. I want to confess that I'm not just a research fellow in this university, but I'm also a student in the Escuela de Lenguas. I was attending... Since I'm on to now, I'm attending a conversation club, so maybe my teacher is going to tell me something after this panel. But, well, concerning to the question, I want to say something that about if research is a calling or not. And I agreed. I don't know if it's a calling. I wouldn't say so. But I think that behind research, there's something, there's a natural disposition, or it's a natural tendency, and this natural tendency is curiosity. I think that behind research is curiosity. Even before you can pose a question, curiosity is behind that question. And I think that's, if there's something like a calling, that could be a natural tendency, and that's curiosity. And if, another question was, what are your main motivations to keep doing research? I think that the research itself, it's a motivation for doing research. It's very interesting because when you try to answer a question, or when you suppose that you answer a question, another question appears. It's like, it's very interesting because it's like, I don't know if you have heard something about the Hydra. Hydra was a mythological monster in Greek mythology, and this was a water monster with many faces. And when you cut off one of the faces, another two faces appears. And I think the research is something like that. When you answer a question, another two question or more question appears, or another question emerge. So I think that this is the main motivation for doing research, the research itself. And there was another question about if you ever felt disappointed when you are doing research. I think that what could be disappointed is when you don't have enough resources for doing research. Of course, and for the resources, I'm not thinking just in the economical resources. You need to, of course, you need to go to a congress, and maybe you have to travel to another state or another city or another country. But I'm thinking also in some kind of, I don't know how to say that, but kind of material resources. For doing research, you need a library, or you need a laboratory, or you need a group a research group so you can talk about the ideas you have. So sometimes when you don't have those resources, could be disappointed. The research itself, it's not disappointed. I think it's, the problem is the resources that you need for doing research. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everyone. There's a set of questions here to answer. I will leave the first one to be answered with my last question, which has to do with education. So in short, I will say that it's a mixture of a calling and training, as we have all agreed. But I will discuss that in length during the question number 6. So how did I start doing research? Well, basically because I confronted a bunch of stuff that I had no idea about. Basically, I was a Mexican that went to study Vikings. And it was a complete unknown world for me, from the language to the culture. So everything was new, and I was curious about everything. Of course, when you confront something that is unknown, you think that everything is new, and you want to rediscover the wheel in a certain way. So, well, I started doing research, but first finding what has been done, to find out what is there to be done. And by being, constantly surprised about it. Also, well, I started doing research by not knowing. And not knowing something is the mother of all research, I think. You have questions that you need to answer, so you start doing research by asking yourself a lot of questions. Main motivations, well, it's the same, it's just answering questions. I'm a very nosy person, I want to know a lot of stuff, I ask lots of questions, and I'm not happy with the answers that I get most of the time. So I just try to find my own answers to those questions. And sometimes I'm not happy with my own answers either, and that's part of the disappointment. But then when you're not happy with your own answers, well, at least you find something new as well. If you want to prove something, and in the end you proved exactly the contrary, well, you still proved something. So it is behind every satisfaction there is a deception, there is a disappointment, and vice versa. Other motivations are traveling, because I do Vikings. So I get the chance to go and dig in Iceland. I have a chance to go and dig in Denmark and be there with my old friends. So I'm doing research in a dig, while at the same time I'm sharing time with some old friends and discovering something new in a very nice environment. And of course the economical bonus that we're all talking about, that CONACYT gives you money at the Sistema Nacional de Investigadores. So yes, I have been disappointed while doing research, sometimes because I don't get the answers that I was expecting, sometimes because I have no way of finding my answers, as Jonathan was mentioning, because of the lack of primary sources. How do you overcome that? Well, sometimes you don't overcome it. But most of the time you overcome it by finding new questions to be answered. Right? I could not answer this, there's no way of answering that. Well, let's find something new to do. And well, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, in the next part, I am going to address each of our experts to ask them to share their experience with us on different topics related to research. I would like to start with Martha Lengling. Martha, would you please talk to us about your experience in the process of doing research?
Yes. So when I start about doing research, first of all, I try to systematically come up with a project. In our university, every year I try to do one project, and then usually I'm the lead in that project, and then I'm a participant in others. So you may have a number of projects that you're working on, but systematically I say every year I'm going to do at least one be the lead of a research group. And so when I'm coming up, well, what do I want to do for the next year? I think, okay, what do I like? And my area is teacher identity, teacher development. And so I look at what I like, but I also have to see what's going on in that area throughout the world, because we may like something, but what we have to do is to know what's going on. What do the other people say about your area? And you have to find out, and you have to fill in a gap. You have to say, this is what I want to do, and there's something missing. Okay, so once you find that, and a lot of times it's just the context. You say, here in Mexico, we need to find out about X. And that is very valid if that's what you want to do. But you have to know what's going on in the world, what has been published, and is your research relevant? Is your research going to add more information? And how does that react, or how does that relate to what's going on with other parts of the world? So you have to know what's being published in your area, the past and the present, and then what you're going to be published in the future. Then begins a long thinking process. This is what I enjoy, as you think about it. And it's not that you sit down and think. The thinking process takes over your life, and you're thinking about it all the time when you're doing things. You're looking at what is out there. You're doing research as far as on the internet, in books, and you're trying to put it together. And I use that metaphor of puzzle, and that's where you have your question, you're trying to find a solution, and then from there I go to the data collection, and I make decisions about what kind of techniques do I want to use? What kind of research do I do? I do qualitative research. I do mostly ethnographic perspectives. I look at the type of techniques that I enjoy, and I don't do something I don't like to do. I always choose things that I like to do that, as far as techniques, for example, focus groups, interviews, diary studies, where you talk with people, things like that. So that kind of goes with me personally. And so then I collect the data. And you look at the data, and you think, and you think, and you keep thinking, and you look for those things that are starting to pop out in the data, okay? And whenever you have problems, okay, well, what does this mean? I try to avoid what do I think, Martha, but what does the data say? Because I think sometimes the researcher wants to say, this is what I think. And I think we really need to also go back to the data and see what the data says. So you get the data, you analyze the data, you come up with these themes that are coming from the data, and then when you're doing that, you're also thinking, oh, what are the conclusions? The conclusions are always in that thought process, and you're thinking, oh, this means that. And so it's a very messy thought process of analyzing, thinking, going back, coming up with conclusions, implications, and then, after all of that, you have to think some more. You start with the writing of something. And when you research, you should think about a presentation. During a year, I usually do 2 to 3 presentations of what I'm doing in the research that year. And then you think of publication, whether it be a proceeding from an event. And so when I'm looking at conferences, if I see a place where I can do an article and a presentation, I think, oh, that looks good. So you think of what is the end product, because we don't just want to do research and just let it float around in the air. You want to show it to the public, and showing it to the public is perhaps in a presentation, international, national, and then also in a publication, a proceeding, an article, a chapter in the book. So that whole process can go beyond a year. And so in my year that I'm doing one project as a lead researcher, I may have other research projects where I'm participating, and it's a very complex process. So I think I've answered all the questions.
Thank you. Now the next questions are addressed to Homero Adame, and it's on the topic of methodology. And the questions are, do you have a favorite research method? How do you decide which method you want to use? And if you were to recommend a method, which one would you recommend?
Well, a favorite method, it is a tricky question always, because what is a favorite method in this way? I don't think there's one favorite, because it's what you're going to do requires a certain method. So if you had a favorite method and you always wanted to go through your favorite method, you would stick into a pattern, and all your work would have similar results. So it depends very much on what you're going to do. Now, as a favorite method, and I'm going to quote a little bit of what Fernando said, is traveling. It's not a method of research, but it's a motivation that, or the driving force for what I do. You know, when you have the itching of a need to go somewhere and find something new, then you have to travel, and that's how it begins. But yes, in mostly I do qualitative research. Sometimes I have to triangulate information and things like that, and also do other sort of research in libraries in order to validate information that I have gathered in the field. But basically, it's qualitative. And how do you decide which method to use? Well, I've already answered that. It's not you decide, but it's the project that you have that decides for you. In my case, that most of the books I published are into oral tradition, and they just they start as a project, a project that I begin by myself because it's my motivation to do a new book. And for example, there's going to come a new book. It's going to be published in April. That it never began as a project per se, because I've been doing research on oral tradition in the desert for many years. And I have collected so many stories of different kinds that I put them I categorize them. And last year, the editor of a publisher, publishing company in San Luis, the state publishing company, he asked me if I had something to offer to them, and I said, well, I can put a book together for you soon. So I went into my files and I found that I had so many stories related to animals, what people believe. It's beliefs, stories, folk stories, and also medicine and everything related to animals of the desert. So I thought, all right, this is a good piece of work. So I put it together and gave it to the publisher, and it's going to come out. So it was not intended to do research that way, but it came as a product of many years of work. In other cases, I have done research for a specific purpose, and for example, in 2010, I did a book on Miguel Hidalgo. You remember the Bicentenario stuff, and everybody was talking about it, and everybody was trying to publish something. So I did this book but I said, all right, I'm going to do it my way, and the way I like doing my things, which is traveling. So I took the truck and went driving to the desert, and I followed the whole route of where Miguel Hidalgo passed through the state of San Luis Potosí in the Altiplano, in the desert. I found there are 11 eagle heads. You remember those cabezas de águila, those monuments? There are 11 in 11 towns. But I said, well, there's something always in between. So I went to every little village or communities that existed in the time. And for that sort of research, apart from the field work that I did, I had to go to the archives and find information and in order to prove what people were telling me. And it was more of an archaeological type of research, because there was a couple of questions that I had. It's the only time in my life that I had done a research with a questionnaire, very small one with 2 questions. It was like one of the questions was, do you know anything about Miguel Hidalgo passing or staying here in this place? And how people would know that, because it only happened in one particular day over 200 years ago. So they would remember what they were told by their parents and grandparents and so on. So this is not oral history because it was not testimonials, but it is oral tradition with historical backgrounds. But in order to prove what I heard, I went to another village. I collected all the data, and then I went to another village and talked to people and related to what they were saying. And so to get, in the end, with all the information, proven or not, or unproven, I differentiated it as history or oral history or even legends. And basically that was the result of that particular book, which was very difficult but very motivating in the end. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to ask Homero if you have something to share with us, some comments on methodology and research methods that you use.
Homero has already.
Yes. Then I would like to ask Jonathan to tell us about the ethical implications in research. What ethical considerations should a researcher have in mind when doing research? And why is it important to follow these ethical considerations?
Thanks. Well, maybe Homero can tell us something about ethical implications too. But, well, I think that this is a very difficult question. What are the ethical considerations should a researcher have in mind when doing research? That's a very difficult question, and I don't have a clear answer to that question. I've got mixed feelings about that. On the one hand, I think that the researcher must follow some ethical consideration. I think the most basic ones. For example, the researcher must respect some human rights, and I think that the researcher, we can plan a research that can not follow some ethical values. And I'm going to tell something, for example, in my own researches. I'm like a philosopher. I'm interested in philosophy of mind, and the philosophy of mind wants to answer different questions. One of these questions is how the mind is divided or how the brain is divided, for example. And we could imagine different experiments that if we could do that experiment, we could maybe answer some questions. For example, what could happen if a kid, for example, if one part of the brain is removed from a kid, and what could be the results of that kind of experiment? But I think that precisely these kind of experiments are the type of experiments that we cannot do. And we cannot do that because of the ethical values. And in that sense, I think that a researcher must follow some ethical values, at least the most basic ones, like the human rights or the children's rights or something like that. On the other hand, I think that some results of scientific research can change the way we see values. And I'm thinking, for example, in sociology or in anthropology or in other social science. For example, they study how other cultures, how other societies, or how other groups, even in the same society, see values. So maybe some results of this scientific research can change the way we see values. For example, we can see that different societies have different values, and that kind of results can change the way we conceive the values. So I think that it is a kind of interaction, because on the one hand, a researcher must follow some values, but on the other hand, some scientific results can change the way we see values. So it is a difficult interaction between the values and scientific research, I think.
Thank you. Now the next questions are addressed to Douglas. On the topic of being a teacher versus being a researcher, in your opinion, can language teachers be researchers? What kind of topics can a language teacher do research about? And how can a language teacher benefit from doing research? And finally, as a teacher, how do you think you have benefited from doing research?
Okay. First one, in your opinion, can teachers be researchers? Yes. I think any teacher who is interested in learning about their craft, improving, helping their students learn better, I think you may already be doing some form of research. Maybe you don't know it, but you are. Research, from this perspective, is not that big of a deal. Writing about research is where it gets a little bit sketchy, okay? Now, can everybody write at the same level about research? Probably not, but a lot of people can learn, okay? Writing is a skill that it can be developed and perfected over time. Writing about research is another skill that has to be acquired, okay? What kind of topics can a language teacher research about? Here's a very vague answer. Everything, anything, and all that is in between. Okay, if you, as a teacher, have detected something happening in your classroom or in your preparation or just in your work environment that you are interested in learning about or trying to answer questions, which Fernando emphasized earlier, you want to know why certain things are happening or how you can make it different, how you can improve, okay, that's a research question. You just have to figure out how to develop the methodology to explore and find answers to that question, okay? Topics, I'm just going to list a few, and you guys can continue the list. Student behavior, attitudes. When I say attitudes, it can be both teacher and student or all participants, administrators in a school as well. Learning styles, material design, the use of popular culture, music, cinema, which is my thing, social cultural factors, identity issues, special needs learners, which is starting to kind of find its place in our profession in different areas now, types of language and discourse that is being used and being taught. Okay, I mean, if we go with the standard American versus British version or the new globalized, internet version, what's happening with technology and its impact on the English language. How many of you are using emojis instead of actually real words, okay? And what do they mean for everybody? How to, when we transmit a message, what are we trying to say and what's actually being perceived and understood by the other party? I mean, these are all things that can be researched in the field of language teaching, okay? Student context. Something that if you come to a talk tomorrow I'm going to rant about that for a little bit. But there's just all kinds of things. And if you do qualitative research, like I'm not sure if all of us are doing it, but I have a feeling we do, it's exciting when you find something because, as the example of Hydra, cut off one head and two more come right back. And usually at least one of those two new heads is something really cool that you want to explore. Okay, so yeah, enjoy, and this is where you get to enjoy the monster. Okay, just try to control yourself when you do it. How can a language teacher benefit from doing research? For example, action research can help a teacher learn about a problem they've detected with students in class. Okay, you figure out a way to research it, find a solution, experiment with it, take notes, observe. Okay, you can write about it, but if you're a language teacher, what your first concern is how do you make it better? Okay, make it better, then write about it, and then you can publish a book and become really wealthy. Okay, research allows for a more rounded understanding of our profession. If you're doing research, you're reading. Okay, the more, we saw this from Dr. Krashen yesterday. Reading is good. I think we all agree on that. If you're doing research, you are forced to read extensively and intensively about specific areas. So it's only going to help you learn more about your own craft and areas that maybe you weren't aware of at the time. It makes us better and more informed, and helps us to understand our teaching environment, our context better. Okay. Fourth question, as a teacher, how do you think you have benefited from doing research? See above is what I wrote here, what I just said, all the things that you can get from it and do. But in my personal case, research has provided me with wonderful opportunities to publish, to collaborate with colleagues all over Mexico as well as internationally. Throughout the journey, acquiring new knowledge and information about stuff that's not even related to my research, just cultural things, travel. I mean, who doesn't like to travel and learn new things about new cultures? And talking about research, this might sound a little nerdy, but those of you who are a little intimidated by research, once you get past that threshold and you can talk about research and you have people that want to talk about research with you, it's really cool, okay? And I know that might sound nerdy to some of you who haven't gotten past that threshold, but believe me, it is cool. It's like talking about cinema when you have an engaging conversation with someone about the research you do, and they're actually interested, because most people in your house, they don't care what you're doing on research, okay? So get past that threshold, all right? And thank you.
Thank you. Now the next topic is research and its impact on education, and these questions are addressed to Fernando. How do you think research helps the educational system in Mexico? In some BA programs and in most graduate programs, such as MAs and PhDs, is it mandatory to do research? It is mandatory to do research to get a degree. Why do you think that is?
Okay, well, I'm going to take a very long detour in answering this question because it involves the educational system, and I'm going to also answer one question that I left unanswered from my first round. So, research and its impact on education. Is it a calling or not? Well, it's a mixture of both, as I said at the beginning, because as children, every single one of us is very nosy. And we want to research, we want to know the world. And sometimes we behave like mad scientists. You want to know what's inside a frog. You want to know if this spider can swim, and then you draw on a spider. And you want to know why the sky is blue. You know, where do children come from? You want to know, where did my grandfather go? And we go and ask adults. And adults answer us most of the times, well, sometimes with lies, like, oh, an angel came for your grandfather, children come from Paris, and the sky is blue because God is a boy, or something like that. And in that way, by lying to us constantly, at the time that we're developing this inner researcher in us, that we're developing this inner scientist, going and asking adults, well, they just kill that inner researcher in us. Stop asking. You're asking too many questions. Shut up. Go and watch the telly, go and surf the internet. And then, to make things worse, after all these lies, then we go to school. And we go to school, and well, once we go to school, in theory, the teachers there do not lie to us, but they teach us what research is and what science is. And from our very earliest age, well, science is, if you want to know chemistry, as I learned it as a child, was memorizing the periodic table. Learning physics was not trying to understand how the universe works, was not trying to understand how atoms collide with each other, it's just memorizing formulas so that we can answer and solve the questions so that we can pass the exam. The way I learned philosophy, for example, when I was in high school, I used to go to the classroom. The teacher used to sit down with this yellow old notebook and dictate a question. And after that, he would dictate the answer. And that day after day for a month, and then came the monthly exam, in which he would just post 10 of those questions, and we had to provide the exact same answer, including the punctuation. And then, well, education continues killing the inner researcher in us. It makes us think that doing research, that doing science is just about repeating, about memorizing, that it's not exciting, and it just kills it. Actually, for example, at the moment I'm a historian, and history was one of the subjects that I hated the most when I was in high school. I could not stand it because it was just about memorizing dates. So the education system, after all this, going through that they are between our parents and adults when we were children, and education, they kill the inner researcher, they kill the inner sleuth, the inner scientist in us. So that by the time that we go to college, well, we think that's boring. Why do I want to do research? They have numbed us, and we think that doing research is just repeating, just going and finding the monograph, consulting the internet. And they train us basically to find the easy answer to every single question. Because we need our time to do, something else, play Nintendo, whatever. We need to find the easiest answer by Googling it, going to monographs, going to encyclopedias. So now I come to the answer to those questions that you were posing. Do you think, how do you think research helps the educational system in Mexico? Well, the educational system in Mexico, has its flaws, just like every single other educational system. But when we're talking about college, I think that our obligation in college, as college teachers, is to unnumb that numbed student and make those students find out that throughout, or make the students feel the joy that we feel while doing research, and make the students participate or co-participate in all the doubts that we have, in all the questions that we have about the universe. And for us that we are in programs with CONACYT, our obligation is to make our students part of our research if we want to keep in those programs. So that is just how important it is. It's very difficult to correct all the flaws of basic education. But you as future teachers and us as present teachers have the obligation to remain curious, or have the obligations to start being curious and transmit that curiosity to our students. And that is how research can impact education in Mexico. Be curious, be sure to transmit that curiosity so that your students will start questioning more about the world. They will start questioning more about why things are the way they are, instead of just repeating and just repeating and the status quo. Make them question the status quo through your research. And also, well, how does research impact education? Is one question that Douglas was answering was, should teachers do research? Well, they must do research. Actually, every single teacher should do research, even if only to answer the questions of the students that they don't know. If a student comes and asks me a question, I could provide them a lie, like students have, like teachers and parents or adults have done throughout their lives to kill my inner researcher, or I could tell them I don't know. Let's all of us do the research and find the answer and motivate researching students. Second question, in some BA programs and in most graduate programs, it is mandatory to do research to get a degree. Why do you think that is? Okay, I'm out of time, but well, just fast is just to, because we need to do research to be humans, to remain alive. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, I will again address all our group of experts on the topic of stereotypes. I would like each of you to comment on the next questions. Do you think researching is something anybody could do? Do you have to have a special or rare talent to do research? And do you think researchers are stereotyped? Martha, can you please start?
Yes. I think we've talked a lot about can people research and not research, and I think at different levels, we're all in agreement, yes, we should inquire as teachers about what's going on. So I'm going to go to the part, do I think I have any special talents? I don't think so, but I do know that I have learned to be very precise when I'm writing, and I enjoy that. I enjoy being at my computer by myself in my pajamas on a Saturday morning, or I enjoy talking with a person about in an interview, so I enjoy that. So I think, is there a special talent? I think we can learn it, but with those talents, you have to be rigorous, and you have to be very precise. And I'll go back to that thinking time where you have to really go through everything and make sure of what you're saying. The ethical issues are also there, that you have to make sure that you are protecting the people that you're working with. Are you providing, a good point of view of what they're saying, or are you manipulating the data? And I think that is exciting when the researcher goes in and says, I think it's this, and then they see the data and they think, whoa, this is very different. And I think that is exciting to let it go and look at the data. The next question about stereotypes, I think there is a stereotype, and I think I talked about this in my presentation about how we label teachers, and sometimes they'll talk about, those SNE researchers and those people that don't have to teach so many hours. And so I think, does everyone have to do the type of research I do? No, I don't think so. And I don't think that we should require them to do that exact type of research that I do, because I think everyone has to make a decision. Do they want to teach and research? Do they just want to research? There are many possible things they can do, but I think the idea of researching for inquiring as teachers, I think we're all in agreement with that. But there are these stereotypes of researchers, this ivory tower, that they're up above there. And I think one of the ways, and I think Fernando has talked about this, is that we have to invite people. Every time I do a research project, I have a student. And I love working with a student because it's one-on-one. And probably about the thing I like about the research is that one-on-one activity with my computer, with my student, with the person I'm interviewing. And then another thing I've been doing recently is I invite other teachers who have not had a research experience, a traditional research experience, and I invite them in a project with me. And so I sort of mentor them because I see myself as I have to show them how to do it because no one showed me. And so I think we can help other people to be part of this research project, this traditional research project of writing, publishing, by inviting students. And CONOCYT tells us, you have to do it. CONOCYT is like a, mother, father image, we have to obey, and we invite them.
Thank you.
Well, I agree about anyone can do research. Actually, we have been saying that anyone does research because we start from curiosity from a very, very age, and that is research. You want to find out why this and why that, and you want to prove that your parents, what they were telling you about, where did Grandpa go to a voyage, and he will never come back, or he went to heaven, those kind of things. Yeah, that anyone can be a researcher, yes, but not anyone has the methodology to do research. That is the big difference, because the methodology and the technique is something you learn. There's no other way. Either you learn it by reading and researching, and at school, or you also learn it by how do you say, empirical way, that just you learn it, and you develop your own method, which will not be your favorite necessarily because you have to use others, but you develop your ways. And in the sense of stereotypes, what Martha said, obviously she referred to the researchers in the field of, in this case, English, teaching English, or yes, I think there are stereotypes. I taught English for many years ago, so there are stereotypes for teachers. There are stereotypes for researchers, and in the case of CONACYT, if you are in sciences or humanities or anything, there are stereotypes, but we can always break the stereotypes. And also, I go back, can anyone do research? Yes, you can. And I mean you, whoever is listening and hasn't done it or think that hasn't done it, yes, you can do it. And the best thing is that practice makes perfect. So you just try it and try it and try it, and then one day you'll get very good results. Thank you.
Okay, this might sound a little repetitive, but do you think it's something that anyone can do? Yes. But I do repeat, writing about it is where some discrepancies may come into play. We don't all research the same way. We might decide we want to research this bottle of water, and these 5 people here and the 100 plus that are out there, they're going to look at it differently, and they're going to have a different preference for how they want to look at it. And then when they write about it, you're going to see diversity like you've never imagined, okay? So yes, everyone can and probably does and should. However, it's not, we start to differentiate a little bit in the way that we write about it and what it means to us, okay? Do I have a special talent? No. I mean, if I can research, you can research. It's that simple, okay? Research is something that we improve with each new project, with each publication, with each experiment, with technique. I mean, if you're going to interview someone for your research to collect data, the first time is horribly scary, okay? And then you listen to your recordings, and you realize how stupid we sounded when we asked these questions. And then you do it again and again and again. And then you stop hearing your own voice, and you start focusing more on the other people that are involved. It's something that it's a skill that you refine and you hone over the years with more practice. Now, my special talent, I'm stubborn and I continue, okay? And I'm ignorant to the stupidity that I often perform when I'm doing research, and I just keep going. That's a special talent if you want a sincere answer. Just keep at it. Do I think researchers are stereotyped? I used to stereotype researchers, okay, until I became one, and then I realized that it's a different world that I didn't know anything about. All right, I'm going to flip this over to you. What are the stereotypes you have about researchers? I used to think these researchers, the PhDs, they were these, eminencias, and put them on a pedestal. And then I did a PhD, and I realized what an idiot I was. Okay, or I did something wrong because I'm not on a pedestal, these other people are. But it's not that big of a deal. But until you actually get involved and engage with this concept or this notion of research, that's when you're going to realize that your stereotypes you're going to unlearn your stereotypes. I can't tell you to stop thinking that stereotype or stop having it. Until you have that experience, you will realize the mistakes. Okay, thank you.
For the first question, do you think researching is something anybody could do? I think that at least in principle, anybody could do research. Because, well, as I've already said, I think that behind research it's a natural tendency, and this natural tendency, everybody has that natural tendency, that is curiosity. And I think that at least in principle, anybody can do research. And I'm going to say something that maybe it's a oversimplification, but I think that research maybe is the result of three aspects. I think the curiosity would be a natural tendency, and this depends on the person. And I think the other is a methodology. I think that there must be, for doing scientific research, we must follow a kind of scientific methodology. And then I think that, as I already said too, we need some material resources. For example, it would be impossible to do research, for example, for a physics, or for if you are interested in chemistry or something like that, if you don't have a laboratory. So you need material resources, for example, a library, a laboratory, or a research group. You need to follow some methodology, and of course you need a natural talent. That talent is curiosity. And there's another question. Do you have to have a special talent to do research? Well, I don't think so. I think curiosity, it's a natural tendency, as I already said. I was remembering that once I read something about memory, and it was an experiment with rats in laboratory. And I think that there were rats in a box, for example, and the scientists put some toys in that box. And one day, for example, they put a toy and the rat inspect that toy, and the other day they put the same toy and a new one. And the rat inspects more carefully the new object. So I think that, well, this result could be read as even the rats have something like a curiosity. So maybe curiosity is it is not a human tendency, but a animal or a mammal tendency. At least rats or even mammals have a curiosity. So I think if just imagine if rats can have that tendency, humans, of course we have that tendency. So we don't need a special talent for doing research.
Yes, it was off. Okay, yeah. My 3 minutes start counting now. Okay, So I will answer the three questions in quite quickly. For the first one, is research something anyone can do? Well, it has been discussed. Yes, everyone can do it as long as you have the methodology. Research is about method. It's curiosity plus methodology, and that's it. Everyone has the curiosity. Methodology is a skill that you have to acquire. It doesn't come naturally. Do you have to have or more do you have a special or rare talent to do research? No. All you need to do research is training to acquire the methodology. And the second thing that you need is liking a subject a lot, because you need to be devoted a lot of time. You need to devote a lot of time to it. And if it's something that you don't like, you're going to go crazy. So you need to like something enough to lock yourself every day, 24/7, to think about the same subject. So no, you don't need talent. You just need skills, and you just need patience, and you need time. And that's it. And people tell me, like, oh, Fernando, you speak so many languages. That's not a talent, that's a skill. And you acquire skills, you acquire the skills as you need them to do your own research. And that is not a talent. So people might confuse that training with a talent. And that takes me to the stereotype bit. I think there's a stereotype, or at least we are very funny people, or researchers, because we are very mono-obsessive. If you're doing a research about the social history of the potato, well, your whole life is going to be potatoes, and you will be only talking about potatoes to people for years. So that's a stereotype. It's not a stereotype. It's just some kind of a mental illness. So I don't know how to call it. It's just you get fixated on a subject, and that might be the only stereotype. And well, some fellows also see researchers as some demigods. So when we go visit people across the street, they say that we come from the Olympus Mount. And I even got my own name. I'm Hades, so at least I got to be a nice demigod from the Olympus. You know who you are. And even if there are stereotypes, I think that we should not start believing them, because not all stereotypes are good. Actually, no stereotypes are good, but some stereotypes are really bad. An example from when I was in college, I was doing my BA in Spanish literature, and I had this teacher, and he had just finished his PhD. So he felt like he was on the top of the world. And we were in class, and all of us gave opinions. We were discussing books or discussing the context of the books. And he constantly kept us telling to shut up, because we were only BA students. One day, when we did research, then we would have our own opinion. I took that teacher as an anti-model for my teaching, in order not to repeat that same stereotype. So now researchers are just normal people, but with lots of time to devote to a subject they like, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, I would like to invite our panelists to share with us your additional final comments on the topic of research. Martha, would you please share with us? No? All right.
I guess I would invite everyone to participate in research and not be afraid of it. But that's all I can say is, try it and see if you like it. And you may not like it the first time, the second time, third time, then you think, there is something there. I kind of agree with Fernando that we're these obsessive people about X theme, and this is what we think about. But just try it.
Thank you.
Well, I would say just try it, do it. If you fail, do it again. It's like when you're writing a poem, you're writing a book, or you're writing a brief text. You don't like it, and write it again. And do it, and do it, and do it, and one day it will come out, and as I said, practice makes perfect. You just do it.
Two things. Going back to the stereotypes. There is one thing we should all know about stereotypes. In every stereotype, there is an ounce of truth. Okay? Fernando mentioned the obsessiveness. Okay? There's a stereotype about certain researchers being a little bit kind of off their rocker, crazy. Okay? There is an ounce of truth to some of that. Okay? So enjoy that ride if you go down the road of research. The second thing, for those of you here who might be in undergraduate studies or postgraduate studies with that big monster thesis waiting for you, it's just a little piece of advice, okay? It's not such a big thing. You have to learn to minimize it, okay? I received some wonderful advice when I was doing my PhD work, and what this person told me is like, this little black dot is your thesis. And all you're doing is looking at this tiny little black dot intensively. Okay? It's just a little thing. It's just a thesis. Okay? It's just your life. Haha. No. It's just something small that you should not let grow into this giant, multi-headed monster. All right? Focus on what you're trying to accomplish with your research, and you will see that you will finish very quickly. And then afterwards, you're going to remember me saying this, and you say, wow, I'm going to thank him one day. Okay? All right, thank you.
Thank
you. Maybe I'm going to repeat what has already said, but I think also that you are going to learn how to do research when you try to do it. So I think that you have to try to do research, you have to do it, and you have to enjoy research. You are going to, believe me, doing research is something that you can enjoy, and you can, we were talking about das hydra, this like a metaphor, and it is very motivating when you cut off one head. You are going to be very happy when this, and you are going to be even happier when you see that two other heads emerge. Just enjoy that.
Okay, since everyone was so fast, I think I have time for one quick anecdote. There were 3 monkeys in a cage and a ladder, and at the top of the cage there was a banana hanging. So the first monkey went up the ladder to grab the banana, and immediately the researchers sprayed cold water over the 2 monkeys that did not go up. And then the second monkey went up to get the banana, and the researchers did the same with the first and the third monkey. By the time the third monkey went up the ladder, the other 2 monkeys, they knew that they were going to be sprayed with cold water. So they immediately grabbed the monkey that was going up and gave him a bad beating. And then the researchers took one of the original monkeys out and put in a new monkey that had never been through the experiment. That new monkey went up the ladder, and immediately the 2 original monkeys grabbed that third monkey and gave him a beating. That new monkey did not know why he was getting beaten, because they were not even spraying them with cold water anymore. And so, after time, all the 3 monkeys, all the 3 original monkeys were replaced, and no monkey was being sprayed with cold water anymore. But whenever a new monkey was introduced in the cage, he used to go up the ladder to grab the banana, and the other 2 monkeys would not let him. They would beat him, and they would never let him get to the banana, even though none of them had ever been sprayed with cold water. Why? They did not know. They just did that because that's the way things had been always done. They did not bother questioning things. So one thing is just don't we are the monkeys and this world is the ladder, or this world is the cage. And what I'm going to is don't accept things as they are. Always question things why they are, because we don't know how we get there. We don't know why we get to this status quo. And that's a big topic of research. Question reality, because reality is not what you think it is. And I'm not talking metaphysical stuff in here. I'm just talking about the way we perceive things. Now, going back to Earth, and going back to what Douglas was saying, thesis, which is the big monster for most of you. And talking about monsters, And one big recommendation for doing research and confronting the monster is be mono-obsessive. One of the things, or one of the reasons why many people fail doing research, I guess, is that while you're doing research to answer one question, you find so many other interesting things that you just go astray. You start answering one question after the other, and you leave at the end 1,000 half-answered questions, meaning a fail. So my recommendation is just approach your thesis. It's this little black dot, as Douglas said, but only look at that little black dot while you're doing it. There will be 1,000 others, but those are topics for future research. Stay mono-obsessive. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have time to a few questions from the audience that you would like to ask our panelists.
I know we're running out of time. First of all, it's so excellent to talk to all of you guys. We really appreciate your expertise. We really appreciate your eloquence and the way that you're addressing all of these things. Thank you very much. Can we give them another applause? Wow, it's so nice to see you guys. Most of us are involved in English language education somehow in Mexico. And obviously, for researchers, I'm doing my master's in research right now, the question is always the question. You're talking about chopping the head off a hydra and then two come up, but one head sometimes is a lot bigger and it requires a book to answer. And some require a thesis and some require a high school or junior high research paper. Do you not think, or do you have any advice for us when it comes to refining questions and the answers? Because I think that's generally, we talk about questions, but some require theses, some require books, some require small journals. And it would help us, I think, a lot in terms of teaching students to get into research by refining questions. Thank you.
I'm going to go ahead and answer very quickly. I think it's a very good question, and I read somewhere when I was doing my research that visualization is important. So I have Post-its, posters on where I'm living about my thinking process. And so I would, somehow find out what it is that you're looking at, and visualization, whether it be writing down, drawing, or whatever. And that will help you come to the specifics of what it is you're looking at. And I agree with Fernando about this big thing. And when I talk to my students, I talk about you're flying around in the air, and get it down to that specific. And my advice is a visualization cue, whether it be index cards, Post-its, something on your wall to help you.
I think I would only add to that, sometimes it's simplistic what I'm going to say, but when you have that initial research question or set of research questions, look at them carefully. Ask someone else to look at them. And if you can answer any of your questions with yes or no or less than 5 words, then your thesis is finished. Okay? And you have to fix that question. You want the question to provoke a methodology and provoke curiosity so that you are actually reading and applying data collection techniques. If your question is, do students learn English better in a classroom where culture is involved? The answer is yes. And what are you going to research? You would want to reword it to like, how might culture impact the learning of language in a certain environment, so that your question is forcing you to research the different aspects of learning in language and not just answering a question yes or no. I catch myself in that all the time and end up rewriting a question 100 times before you finally get the answer that really takes you down the path for your research. Okay, thank you.
Just one last bit answering that question. We tend to obsess too much about the length of a thesis, because we have this institutional requirement that a thesis must be 70, 100, or 200 pages long. But actually, the question can be a very difficult question, and you can provide a very meaningful, life-changing answer in a few pages. So you can answer a question that you can have a PhD thesis in 10 pages if you answer a very important question or solve a very important problem in short. But we are forced sometimes to extend it to cover the minimum amount of pages required. So it's just about the question and the way that you answer it, and not about the length of the paper.
Thank you. I know there are still many questions, but the time has run out. Now I would like everybody to help me thank our panelists for their valuable comments today with a big round of applause. And to express our thanks, the government of the States has sent these gifts to our panelists as a thank you for your support and your participation in this conference today.